Most movies make castle sieges look like one big, loud action scene. Guys charging the gate, a few ladders going up, some dramatic sword fighting on the walls, and then, boom! The castle falls. But real medieval castle defense in Europe wasn't like that at all. It was slower, colder, and way more calculated. A castle wasn't just a fancy house with tall walls. It was a pressure machine built to wear you down. Your body, your patience, your supplies, and your nerve before you ever got close enough to swing a weapon. The scariest part isn't some heroic last stand at the gate. It's the simple fact that everything about a fortress was designed to turn time into a weapon. The terrain, the narrow approaches, the traps built into entrances, and the constant mental grind of being watched from above. So if you've ever thought, why didn't they just storm the walls? You're about to see why that idea usually ended in disaster, and why the real story is darker, smarter, and honestly a lot more terrifying than the Hollywood version. Number 1, the castle was the weapon. A medieval castle wasn't a cool backdrop where heroic sword fights just happened to take place. It was a purpose-built machine meant to break people physically, mentally, and financially. The whole point was to make an attacker pay for every single step forward, even before anyone touched the walls. And the darker part is this. The goal often wasn't even to kill everyone outside. It was to grind them down until they gave up, ran out of supplies, started deserting, or turned on their own commander. Castles weren't designed for fair fights. They were designed to make fights unfair on purpose. Every choice where the castle sat, the way roads approached it, how the walls curved, where archers could stand, was basically an argument written in stone that said, "You can try, but it's going to cost you." And it wasn't just about war. A castle was also a threat hanging over local people every day. It protected the lord, sure, but it also enforced power. If you lived nearby, you didn't need Hollywood to tell you the castle was dangerous. You could see it. You could feel it. A castle meant taxes, rules, and armed men who could ride out whenever they felt like it. So when an army showed up to attack one, nobody inside was thinking about romance or honor. They were thinking about what happened if the walls failed. Because in a lot of real sieges, mercy was optional, and violence after a breach could get ugly fast. That fear is a big reason defenders fought so hard. Not because they loved the Lord's banner, because they understood the stakes in a very personal way. Number 2, the approach was a killing zone. Movies love the moment where attackers reach the walls, like that's the start of the real danger. In real life, reaching the walls was the end of the easy part. The land around a castle could be shaped to punish you. Slopes were steep for a reason. Open ground was left open for a reason. Trees and cover were cleared, so you couldn't sneak close without being seen and shot at. Then you hit the ditch or the moat, and yeah, forget the crocodiles. A lot of moats weren't even watery. Many were dry ditches deep, muddy and nasty, because a dry ditch still does the job. It slows you down, breaks formations, and makes ladders and siege towers a nightmare to position. And if it was wet, that didn't mean clean water. It could be stagnant, foul, and full of whatever runoff ended up there. Either way, the moat wasn't a cute ring around a fairy tale castle. It was a delay tool. Delay is everything in siege warfare. The longer you're stuck in front of the walls, the longer defenders get to shoot you, the longer your supplies get eaten, and the longer disease gets to work on your camp. Even moving heavy gear was brutal. Dragging a siege tower, a battering ram, or bundles of wood to fill a ditch is exhausting on a normal day. Now do it while people above you are dropping rocks, shooting arrows, and yelling insults that hit right where your morale is already weak. And here's the part Hollywood skips. Your camp outside the castle was its own kind of hell. Packed tents, muddy latrines, rotting food, bad water, and rats. Armies didn't just wait during a siege. They decayed. Dysentery alone could gut a force faster than arrows. So castles didn't only defend with walls. They defended by forcing you to live outside those walls long enough for your own body to start betraying you. Number 3, the gatehouse was a meat grinder. The main gate looks dramatic in movies because it's the obvious front door, so Hollywood turns it into a stage for epic clashes. Real defenders loved that attackers thought that way. The gatehouse was engineered as a trap, not a doorway. Start with the basics. Big doors made of thick timber, reinforced with iron, sometimes backed by multiple layers. Then the portcullis, basically a heavy grid that could drop fast and pin people in place, or cut a group in half. Now add the fact that you weren't walking into a wide open hall. You were funneled into a tight passage where you couldn't swing well, couldn't bring numbers to bear, and couldn't easily retreat if something went wrong. Above that passage could be murder holes openings where defenders could drop objects straight down. And here's the reality check. The classic boiling oil thing was not the everyday go-to weapon the movies treated as. Oil was valuable. Defenders used what they could afford and what they had. Stones, heavy beams, sand heated in pans, boiling water, hot lime powder in some accounts, and anything that could blind, burn, or panic a packed group of men. Sometimes the simplest stuff was the worst, because Payne isn't picky about whether it came from legendary siege oil or a bucket of scalding water. The gatehouse also had side doors and internal access points so defenders could move, reinforce, and counterattack without opening the main gate. And then there were Barbican's outer gateworks that forced you through extra turns and extra checkpoints before you even reached the real gate. If you picture a castle entrance as a straight shot, that's the movie version. A lot of real entrances were awkward, angled, narrow, and layered, because every extra second you spend stuck in that space is a second you're getting hit from above and from the sides. The psychology is darkly simple. Once attackers commit into that funnel, fear spikes. They can't see everything, they can't spread out, and they can hear chaos echoing off stone. Panic spreads faster in a tight space. And once panic hits, bravery stops mattering. People shove, people trip, people crawl over each other. That's not cinematic. That's what an engineered trap looks like when it works. Number 4. Walls were built to deny you solutions. Castle walls weren't just tall. They were thick, and thickness is what matters when someone shows up with heavy impact weapons. A wall could be several meters thick, sometimes thick enough to build rooms or passages inside it. That thickness ate the energy of rocks and bolts, and the shape mattered too. Round towers became common, partly because corners are weak spots. A round tower deflects strikes better than a sharp corner, and it gives defenders better lines of sight along the wall. That's the real theme. Angles. Castles are geometry with consequences. Defenders wanted to see you, shoot you, and keep shooting you as you moved. They built wall walks so troops could shift quickly. They used crenellations, the classic teeth on the top so archers could pop out, shoot, and duck back into cover. They cut arrow slits and crossbow slots so narrow you'd struggle to return fire. From the outside, those slits look like tiny scratches in stone. From the inside, they flare wide so a shooter can aim across a broader angle while staying protected. And then there were the add-ons. Wooden hoardings that stuck out from the top of the wall. Basically temporary balconies with holes in the floor for dropping things straight down. Later on, many castles built stone versions of that, idea machicolations, so the drop zone was permanent. If you're thinking, okay, but can't attackers just climb? Sure, sometimes they tried. And defenders had a whole menu for that too. Push ladders away, hook them, cut them, drop stones, stab hands reaching the top, or just keep shooting until the base of the ladder becomes a pile of bodies nobody wants to climb over. The darkest thing is how normal all of this was. There wasn't a sense of, this is too cruel. It was seen as practical. If someone came to take your home, your land, and your family's future, the math was simple. Make it impossible for them to feel safe for even a minute. Number 5. Ranged fire was less sniping and more pressure. Movies love the idea of the perfect shot. One arrow, one dramatic fall. Real castle defense was usually about volume, timing, and targeting what mattered. Archers and crossbowmen didn't need to hit the hero. They needed to hit the work. They aimed at the crews moving ladders, pushing towers, carrying shields, and digging. They aimed at horses because a horse going down creates instant chaos and blocks movement. They aimed at faces and hands because armor doesn't cover everything equally, and disabling a man is often more useful than killing him on the spot. An injured soldier takes friends out of the fight to carry him, and it drags morale down. Crossbows were especially nasty in this role because they could deliver heavy bolts with serious penetrating power, and they were easier to use effectively with less training than some powerful bows. Add height advantage, and the defenders can reach farther and see more. And the sound matters too. People underestimate how terrifying it is to hear constant impacts thunks into shields, cracks on wood, the hiss of arrows, and not know which one has your name on it. That uncertainty wears you down. Now mix in stones. It sounds primitive, but gravity does not care about your armor. Dropping a heavy rock from a wall onto a packed group below is devastating. Even if it doesn't kill, it breaks limbs, crushes gear, and makes everyone flinch away from the base of the wall, exactly where they need to be if they want to place ladders or pry at masonry. And the defenders didn't need special weapons for this. A castle is full of heavy things. Stone is literally everywhere. That's another dark joke. The building itself provides ammunition. Then you get the little tricks that feel almost petty until you realize how effective they are. Defenders could set up screens to hide movements. They could use sudden bursts of fire or smoke to confuse. They could fake weakness in one area and then concentrate fire where attackers rush in. Siege warfare was often a battle of attention. Make the enemy look at the wrong thing, commit to the wrong move, and pay for it. Number 6. Siege dirty tricks. Were normal, not rare. Hollywood sometimes shows a big trebuchet rock smashing into a tower and everyone gasping. That happened, sure, but the darker, more common reality was the long list of unpleasant methods people used because they worked. Mining is a perfect example. If you can't break a wall from the outside, you dig under it. You shore the tunnel with timber, reach the foundation, and then burn the supports so the tunnel collapses and drops part of the wall. That's not glamorous. It's hot, cramped, slow, and terrifying work underground, basically digging your own grave and hoping it collapses on the other guy first. Defenders didn't just sit there either. They countermined digging their own tunnels to intercept yours. Sometimes that meant underground fights in darkness with almost no space to move. Sometimes it meant flooding tunnels or smoking people out. And because both sides knew what was happening, there were tricks to detect digging. Listening posts, quiet nights where defenders tried to hear scraping, and simple tests like watching for vibrations. On the surface, fire was another constant fear. But again, not the movie version where everything lights up like a fireworks show. Wet hides could cover wooden gates to resist burning. Defenders kept water and sand ready because sparks happen, and a single fire in a tight castle can kill you faster than an enemy sword. Attackers tried fire arrows, burning carts, pitchy bundles, anything to start a blaze. Defenders tried to smother it quickly. Then there's disease. People sometimes talk about medieval biological warfare like it was some organized science project. It wasn't modern lab warfare, but it could still be brutal. Siege camps were already filthy, and anything that increased rot and sickness could tip the balance. There are historical accounts of carcasses and other foul materials being thrown to spread stench, contaminate water, and demoralize. Even when it didn't cause a specific outbreak, it made camp life worse, and worse camp life means more sickness and less fighting ability. And don't overlook the simplest dirty trick of all: negotiation with teeth. A lot of sieges ended with deal safe passage, ransom, terms of surrender, because both sides understood what came next if the walls were breached. Sometimes the attacker offered mercy to get the defenders to quit early. Sometimes they promised mercy and then didn't deliver, because fear of betrayal is also a weapon. Sometimes defenders held out because they expected relief armies. Sometimes the relief never came. And if you want a genuinely dark reality check, betrayal and bribery could matter as much as catapults. A gate opened from the inside ends a siege instantly. That's why commanders worried about pay, food, and morale inside the castle just as much as the strength of the walls. Number 7. Life inside was its own grind. Movies show the inside of a besieged castle like it's a dramatic huddle in a candlelit hall. Real sieges were long, boring, stressful, and filthy, with short spikes of terror. Water was life. A well inside the walls could make the difference between holding out and collapsing. Castles that relied on outside water sources were vulnerable, and attackers knew it. Food mattered just as much, and not in the big roast dinner way. Supplies were salted meat, hard bread, dried peas and beans, grain stuff that keeps. Tasty wasn't the priority. Surviving was. And as time dragged on, rations tightened, tempers got shorter, and sickness spread. Castles had latrines garderobes, often built into walls with chutes that dropped waste outside or into pits. That's convenient until the outside becomes the battlefield, and the waste piles up where attackers can see it, smell it, and sometimes use it as a clue to where weak points and drains are. And inside the castle, space is limited. People sleep packed together. Ventilation isn't great. Smoke, damp, and stress do their work. Morale becomes the hidden front line. Defenders tried to keep spirits up because despair can break a garrison faster than rocks. They also played mind games back. If you can make the attackers think you're well-fed and confident, you're buying time. That's why you hear stories of defenders eating and drinking where the enemy can see, or making noise at night, or showing banners and routine patrols to look strong. It sounds like taunting, but it's strategy. Meanwhile, defense wasn't just the knights. It was everybody. Skilled soldiers mattered, but sieges turn entire communities into a system. Someone has to carry stones to the wall. Someone has to fetch water, repair gear, cook, treat wounds, and watch for fires. Women and teenagers could be part of that labor, because in a siege you use every able body. The violence outside wasn't the only pressure. The pressure inside was the constant question: if we fail, what happens to us? And people knew. Men could be killed or forced into service. Wealthy defenders might be ransomed. Poorer ones might not be worth ransoming at all. Women faced the threat of assault. Children could be taken, displaced, or sold. That's not movie darkness. That's the kind of fear that makes ordinary people do extraordinary things, like holding a wall position for hours while exhausted, hungry, and terrified, because the alternative is worse. Number 8. When the wall broke, heroic wasn't the mood. In films, the breach is a big action set piece, a final sprint where the music swells and the good guys do something brave. Real breaches were chaotic, loud, and fast, and they often decided everything in minutes. Once attackers got a foothold, defenders tried to fall back to inner positions, because many castles were layered. Outer walls, inner walls, keeps, towers, narrow staircases that force attackers into single file. Every retreat line was another attempt to turn the fight back into controlled choke points. And the fighting in tight spaces was vicious because there's no room to maneuver. You're shoving, stabbing, grappling, trying not to slip on rubble, trying not to get pinned. If you're wondering why defenders sometimes held out even when the situation looked hopeless, this is why. The moment the enemy fully owns the space, your control is gone. And then comes the part nobody wants to romanticize. The aftermath depended on politics, money, and the attacker's mood. If the castle was valuable and surrender terms were negotiated, people might live. If the attacker wanted an example, things could go very bad for the garrison. If the siege was long and costly, rage could spill over. The darker truth is that rules of war were often more like guidelines, and they bent under pressure. That's why siege warfare was so psychological from the start. The castle's defenses weren't just there to stop bodies. They were there to stop willpower. Because if you can make the enemy decide it's not worth it, you win without ever facing the worst part. And if you can't, you fight in spaces designed to make sure the worst part happens on your terms. Even the famous last stand moments weren't usually poetic. They were practical, blocking stairwells, burning supplies to deny them, hiding valuables, deciding who tries to escape and who stays. If relief forces were rumored to be close, defenders might suddenly get their second wind. If no relief was coming, you might see the opposite people arguing, blaming, begging the Lord to negotiate, or quietly planning to open a door at night. And that's the most unsettling thing about real castle defense. It wasn't a clean story about courage. It was engineering, plus endurance, plus fear, day after day, until somebody's logistics, health, or nerves snapped first. And the stone fortress that looked invincible from far away turned out to be a pressure cooker full of very human limits.